What if travel was more than postcards and perfect sunsets? What if behind every journey, from wonders to disasters, from space to underground, discover stories the world rarely shows?
Subscribe and explore the extraordinary.
They say that sleep is essential for human survival, but this man has been awake for more than 60 years without sleeping. His case was studied by doctors, but they couldn't find any reasonable explanation for this phenomenon. We'll get to the bottom of this today. Welcome to the channel. And today we'll tell you about the man who has been awake since 1962. Stay tuned until the end of the video. You won't be able to sleep tonight. It was 1973 when a local doctor first heard about the farmer who didn't sleep.
Ho, ho, ho!
At first, he thought it was just another urban legend, but the doctor soon realized that this time the rumors were true. The patient told him he hadn't slept since the early 1960s. So the doctor decided to run some tests. To his surprise, the examination showed that the patient was perfectly healthy. But how could such a young man not need sleep? Today we'll find out if this story is true and whether the scientists managed to find the reason for this strange phenomenon. There are no big cities in Vietnam.
Ho, ho, ho!
In most villages, there are only a few houses and a small clinic where a traditional medicine specialist practices. People rarely go to see a doctor because most of them believe that Western medicine is dangerous and expensive. So the patient's main treatment is herbal medicine. But this time, the village doctor couldn't help the man who came to see him. He had never seen anything like it before. The patient told him that he had slept for many years and asked him to help him deal with this problem.
Ho, ho, ho!
The thing is, at first, the patient felt fine. He lived his life like everyone else and didn't pay much attention to his unusual condition. But several years later, he started feeling unwell. His vision got worse and his bones started aching. There was also something wrong with his heart. Sometimes it felt like it would stop beating at any moment. That's why the man decided to see a doctor. As it turned out later, this was a turning point in the man's life.
Ho, ho, ho!
It led him to a quiet village where he now lives as a recluse. But why did he stop sleeping? That's exactly what the doctors wanted to find out. In the early 80s, one of the Vietnamese doctors, Nguyen Hong Son, came across an extremely strange case in his practice. A man in his early 40s came to see him. He complained that he had serious vision problems and heart disease. Moreover, the patient was totally unaware of how old he was. According to the man, he stopped remembering time long ago.
Ho, ho, ho!
The doctor found out that the patient couldn't even remember his own name. Later, the man's relatives came to see him, and only then did the doctor find out that the patient's name was Thai Ngoc, and that he was in his early 80s. But how could an elderly man be so unaware of his age? In order to find out what was going on, the doctor decided to dig deeper into the patient's past. As it turned out, Thai was doing quite well up until his late 30s. He had a wife, 2 kids, and worked as a farmer.
Ho, ho, ho!
Then suddenly his eyesight got worse and his head started hurting. One day he just went to bed and never woke up again. At least that's what people from the village say. Later, Thai himself confirmed this story. He told the doctors that he remembered having a terrible headache and then falling asleep. And then he woke up. Only in the morning he felt pretty fine. So he thought it was just a regular headache. But when he went back to work, he realized that he couldn't stop. He was sleepy.
Ho, ho, ho!
Days passed and Thai still couldn't sleep. He became seriously concerned about his condition. So he decided to see a doctor. However, none of the specialists could help him. They prescribed him some pills, but those didn't have any effect. That's how Tai spent his endless sleepless nights. But how could a person stay awake for more than 60 years? Doctors started running tests to find out the reason behind the man's condition. Some experts assumed that Tai had some kind of sleeping disorder.
Ho, ho, ho!
But as it turned out later, this wasn't true. The brain scans showed that while performing their tasks, all the sections of Tai's brain were working in the normal mode. This means that he's just used to living without sleep. After all, scientists believe that it's impossible to stay awake for too long. If you don't sleep for more than 11 hours, you'll start having hallucinations. But even after 12 hours, people usually fall into a state called sleep inertia, which makes them feel dazed and confused.
Ho, ho, ho!
But Tai's tests showed that his mental abilities weren't impaired. What's more, scientists discovered that although Tai didn't sleep, his body still needed rest. Every day between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., the man dozed off and spent 3 hours in a state that resembled sleep. During that time, his eyelids drooped, his breathing slowed down, and his muscles relaxed. But this isn't sleep, since the man's brain continued to generate signals at the normal level.
Ho, ho, ho!
In addition, Tai claimed that he didn't dream during those 3 hours. But how can a person spend a third of his life in a state between wakefulness and sleep? And why does his brain refuse to fall asleep? Scientists found out that over the years, Tai's body got used to functioning without sleep. That's why he looks much older than his biological age. The villagers claim that Tai looks like an ancient mummy. His skin is dry and wrinkled, and his eyes are sunken in his sockets.
Ho, ho, ho!
Also, the man is very thin and hunched over. But despite his advanced age, Tai is still in good health. His blood pressure and pulse rate are normal, and he has no chronic diseases. What's more, Tai doesn't eat meat, but only drinks water and eats vegetables and fruits. Perhaps that's why he's still alive. Tai's relatives did everything they could to help him. They brought him to the National Hospital in Hanoi for a checkup.
Ho, ho, ho!
Tai underwent dozens of tests, but the doctors still couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. They concluded that the man was perfectly healthy, but they still couldn't explain why he was sleeping. All the tests yielded negative results. Even an MRI scan revealed nothing abnormal. Later, the doctors returned to the question of the need for sleep. They found out that over the years, Tai's circadian rhythms changed. Tai doesn't sleep at night, but takes naps during the day.
Ho, ho, ho!
These are the periods of time when his brain stops generating signals, and his muscles relax. Tai spends about 3 hours in this state every day. The rest of the time, he behaves like a normal person. He gets up early in the morning, washes himself, then goes to work in the field. He has no hobbies. He spends his free time alone in his hut. Now the man is completely deaf and blind, so he spends most of his time indoors. He walks around the village, begging for food and money.
Ho, ho, ho!
Villagers give him what they can, because they consider Tai to be a kind of local holy man. Some people say that he's an extraterrestrial being, and others think that he's a human who knows the secret of eternal life. It is hard to say whether the man really has the gift of longevity or whether he is cursed to live on without sleep. But the fact remains, he's been awake since 1962. The villagers tried to engage a Buddhist monk to pray for Tai, but it didn't help. The man still didn't sleep.
Ho, ho, ho!
So, we come to the conclusion that science still has a lot to learn. Although Ty's condition was studied by many doctors, they still couldn't figure out why the man doesn't need sleep. Perhaps one day they'll unravel this mystery. So, what's the longest time you've ever stayed awake? Tell us in the comments. Like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
Ho ho ho!